Hey YouTube. Um, so I hope this is working. Um, I've gone live on Facebook before, but I've never gone live on YouTube. So I thought that I would give this a try. So um, sorry if the picture is not very good. I'm not very technical, and my husband's not home. So we'll just roll with it. So I don't know. I thought it would be fun to just kind of get on here and introduce myself a little bit and talk to you guys about what my channel's about, answer some questions that I tend to get often. My name's Cassie, and I am married to my husband, and I have cerebral palsy. And what cerebral palsy is, it's a condition that affects your brain. I guess it's considered brain damage, and it's with lack of oxygen to the brain. And it depends on the part of the brain that's affected, how it affects you. So luckily for me, I can still talk and walk, and mentally I can function. But walking is difficult for me, and I fall down sometimes, and normal things that might be easy for some people are definitely harder for me. And so growing up, I never thought that I would get married or have kids or anything like that. And not because of what other people have told me. My parents always said, just because you're disabled doesn't mean you can't get married. But that was like me. That was how I saw it, was I'd never get married. And so the fact that I'm sitting here telling you that I'm married and that I have a almost 1 year old is crazy to me. I never thought that that would be a possibility, but that's also why I'm here. I started, watching YouTube and family vlogs a couple of years ago, and when I first found out I was pregnant, a little part of me was like, oh, you should do like a YouTube channel and document this, for your child or for other people, but I was too scared, so I didn't do it. Well, as my pregnancy went on, I started doing some research on people who are disabled who are pregnant, and there was not a lot of stuff out there. There's not a lot of stuff of people with cerebral palsy who are parents, disabled people who are parents. I know that there are people out there, but there wasn't a lot of stuff, research, vlogs I could watch, or anything like that. So, like 6 months after my baby was born, I thought, I have to do this YouTube channel because I want to be a resource for people. So I want people who might be struggling with having a disability, or might be struggling with not knowing how to be a good parent, or not knowing what resources were out there. I want people to be able to use me as a resource. So that's why I started my YouTube channel, Wheeling Through Life. Um, and sometimes it'll be kind of like a family vlog. Sometimes it'll just be informational videos. It just kind of depends. And I'm just going to talk about what I find helpful, what I do, so that people can use my example. Now, everybody's different. So just because I do something one way doesn't mean that that's going to work out for everybody. But I might as well use my experience. So I've gotten a couple questions about how was it being pregnant and disabled, or what was the hardest thing about being pregnant and disabled. So obviously, I don't know what it's like to be pregnant and not disabled, so I only have this one experience. But when I first found out I was pregnant, the scariest thing for me was crap. What if I fall while I am pregnant? And so because I walk and I don't usually use a walker or a wheelchair when I walk, especially like around the house. But I do fall down a lot. So that was one of my biggest things. So the first thing that I would recommend is when you're thinking about having a baby, I would go and do like a pre-pregnancy appointment with a high-risk doctor or your OB, so that you can get all those questions answered before you even get pregnant. So when I went, I said to the doctor, I said, okay, one of my biggest things is what happens if I fall down while I'm pregnant? Another one of my questions was, am I going to have to be put on bed rest? Another question was, am I going to have a C-section? All of those. Now, granted, everybody's situation is different, but for me, so the doctor, her biggest thing was for the first few months, you don't have to worry necessarily if you fall down because the baby is so small. But the further along you get, the more you're going to have to worry about how big the baby's getting and harming the baby. And so she really suggested to me you need to start using your walker and your wheelchair all the time, just to be safe. And that took a minute for me to get used to, using my walker and my wheelchair all the time because I'm just not used to it. And it's hard. It's not really necessarily embarrassing, but it's just things are more difficult when you're using a walker or a wheelchair. They're not as easy, and so it took me a minute to get used to that. There were a couple times that I did fall down while I was pregnant. It was early on in the pregnancy though, and when I knew I was falling, I would try to position my body so I wasn't falling on my stomach. But it definitely, the further along in pregnancy I got, the harder it was to get around. And that was the other thing was the doctor said, well, we don't know what your body's going to do. As far as a doctor's standpoint, I'm just going to treat this as a normal pregnancy until it's not. And so when I asked her about bed rest, she said, just because you have cerebral palsy doesn't mean you'll be put on bed rest. That's completely up to your body and how it reacts. She also said, just because you have cerebral palsy doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a C-section. She said, I've done C-sections on people with cerebral palsy, on people without cerebral palsy, and I've done natural births with people with cerebral palsy and people without. So she said it really just depends on your body. And so that's how we took it. I just took it day by day. I ended up not having to be put on bed rest, but so our baby was due in March, and in December, I decided that the doctor decided I should stop working. Not that I had to be put on bed rest, but that the less moving around I did or the less driving or those types of things, the better it would be for my body. So I just stayed at home and I went stir crazy, I'll tell you. But I did a lot of puzzles and I had visitors come. But I could do things. And when my husband got home, then I would go out. But it was just better to be safe than sorry as far as protecting the baby. The other question was, did I have to have a C-section? So the answer is yes, but that was not because of my cerebral palsy. So as my pregnancy went on, the doctor just kept saying, yeah, we'll treat it as a normal pregnancy. I told her I wanted to not have a C-section if I could help it. But I always had in my mind the instant that I was pregnant, don't be stubborn when it comes to having a safe baby and a healthy baby. Do what you got to do. And so it was like a week before the baby was to be born, I went in for a check, and the doctor realized our plan was for me to be induced. But then the doctor realized that my pelvis was too small. And first, my first instinct was, oh, great. Just another thing that the cerebral palsy took from me was a normal birth for my baby. But she reassured me, no, this has nothing to do with your cerebral palsy. This is just because you're small. You're short, you're small, so you're just built differently. And so, yes, I did have to have a C-section, but it wasn't because of my cerebral palsy. Another question I get is, what do you do for work? So, growing up, I had a really hard time getting a job at like a movie theater or a fast food restaurant or a clothing place. People would take one look at me and they wouldn't hire me. And as a person with a disability, you don't want to assume that it's because you're handicapped that people don't hire you, and you don't really have proof. But most of the time, at least I felt like that's what it was. And so early on in high school, I decided that in order for me to be independent and make a career for myself, I had to go to college to get an actual career. Um, so how I decided what I was going to do, growing up, because of my disability, I worked a lot with different types of social workers. Just on like school and different things like that, hospitals. And so I had some really good social workers and some really bad social workers. And so I decided that I wanted to be a social worker and I wanted to be able to help people the same way that I'd been helped or the opposite way I'd been helped, depending on the situation. So I went to school, I went to college, and I got my bachelor's degree in social work. And back, 10, 20 years ago, a bachelor's degree was like really good, and it still is really good. But I feel like nowadays, the master's degree is what the bachelor's degree used to be. And so I decided to go to grad school and get my master's degree in social work. And so that's what I did. And I even moved away from my family. Those things went across the country. I went to grad school in Texas. And I started working for the district attorney's office in Utah. And I would help victims of crime that had to go through the court process. And I had that job for 10 years. And I loved that job. It was awesome. So my recommendation to you is, if you're having a hard time finding like a job, like just minimum wage type job or something, or you feel like your disability is getting in the way of you getting a job, then try something else. Go to college. Go, I don't know. College was such a good experience for me, and don't let the fact that you have a disability or maybe even a mental disability, like maybe you suffer with anxiety or depression, or you feel like you're not smart, don't let those things stop you. Anybody can go to college, and now that everything is like done online, it's real easy. So that would be one of suggestion, is go to college, because the difference between a career job and just a job is totally different. And when you get into the career field and you're qualified, it still happens. Discrimination still happens, but it doesn't happen as much. Okay, so I was a social worker. I still am a social worker. But when I had my baby, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but I also still wanted to be able to work. And so now they have such cool websites for online counseling. So I do that on the side. I do counseling for the website BetterHelp, and they do video chats and phone chats for counseling. So that's really convenient. And I also, for counseling, I do some in-person counseling in the evenings. And the reason why I chose the evenings was so that I can still be at home with my baby during the day. And then when my husband gets home from work, then I do some counseling sessions in person. And I can make my own schedule. And so it's really nice that I can just do it when it's convenient. And then one other thing I do is I sell mascara makeup. And so I wore the makeup for a really long time, and I love, love, love the makeup. So when I love something and I'm passionate about it, I want to use it more and tell people about it. And so I decided to start selling the makeup. So all of these jobs I don't need to do, but I love them. I love to counsel people. I love to help people. I love to sell this makeup. It's an amazing makeup. It makes me feel good about myself. And so just because you're a parent or somebody with a disability doesn't mean you can't do things that you love. And so I make it a point to still do those things that I love, but obviously my family comes first. Um, let's see, a few the other questions, and I don't know if you've seen some of my YouTube videos, but what was it like dating as a person with a disability or being married as a person with a disability? So dating just sucks for everybody. It's hard for everybody, but the one thing that I did while dating was I didn't sit around and wait for the guy to ask me out. I was upfront. I asked boys out. I didn't put this stigma like boys have to ask the girls out or whatever. I very much was like, you know what? If they're too scared to ask me out, then I'm going to ask them out. And if they don't tell me no, then I'm going to keep doing it. So that's what I did. Um, as far as marriage, um, I don't know what it's like to be married and not be disabled. So marriage is hard. But for the most part, the disability doesn't get in the way of, like, that's not a focus of our marriage. Even when we're going through a tough time, it's not about the disability. It's just about other stuff. So if you change your mindset and don't even think about I'm disabled or I'm struggling, then it won't get in the way. Just be you. That's the most important thing, is to just be you. Don't let anything else get in the way. Don't let anybody else tell you you can't do something. It, like, do what you can. It doesn't matter. You just do what you want. Don't let things stop you. Um so I've been on here for like 18 minutes, so I think I'm gonna stop. But I'm going to try to make my live videos like a monthly thing. So if you guys have other questions or want to know more, go check out my other videos or write a question in the comments of my videos, and I will do some live videos more often. Also, you can follow me on Instagram, Cassie Davis 15, or like my Facebook page, Wheeling for Life. So thanks guys for watching, and I hope you like this.